In this program, Joseph discusses the ultimate mystical experience, identifying with divine power, as well as the difference between ethics and religion, the rapid change in social values, the nature of demons and devils, and a great deal more. This conversation took place in 1984 when Joseph was 80 years of age. We began with a question about a quotation from the New Testament. Joseph, you mentioned Christ was crucified because he said, I and the Father were one. Could you elucidate on that?
Well, the ultimate mystical experience is of one's identity with the divine power. That's the sense of the Chandogya Upanishad saying, Tattvamasi, you are it. That divinity which you seek outside and which you first become aware of because you recognize it outside is actually your own inmost being. Now, it's not a nice thing to say, but it's not good for religious institutions. People find that it's all within themselves. So there may be some point there about our particular situation in the West, where religious institutions have been able to dominate a society. And it's interesting how they handled this in India. The first half of one's life is spent in the society, obeying the rules, following the rules of one's caste, and worshiping the local images of the divine power. But then there comes a time when you should go into the forest. You give up your caste and everything else, and so the life is divided in half. First, the life in the society, and then the life in the forest. The problem, I think, for Western man is to have the two together, so that you're living the life in the society all through your life. No quitting in midlife and going off and having the high realization, but through the actual living of your life to realize the play of the divine mystery, not only in yourselves, but through your friends and your enemies. And I think that's the only possible meaning of Jesus saying, love your enemies. He didn't say don't have enemies, but to have the compassion of recognizing the divine power in them as well as in you. And in the field of time, there's always pairs of opposites. It's got to be that way. Can't be otherwise. And to realize that's the way the one plays through the many is the trick.
As one moves through this process and sees the paradoxes and the dichotomies, particularly with contemporary religious institutions, and when one lives in American society, one hears the separation of church and state. At the same time, we now have a situation where morality and religion and politics are being wrapped up into one thing. What about that? What's going on?
It's too tight a bundle. Ethics and religion are not the same. Religion has a mystical dimension, and that's what it's really all about. Ethics has to do with social values, and religion has to do with personal inward realization. Those are different things. And living in a society to find your realization of the inward values through the ethics of the society, that's the trick, I might say, of being alive in the world.
But when we look at our contemporary life and look at our institutions in contemporary life, it's very rare that we hear things like, or deal with principles like integrity, ethics, life of the spirit. I mean, if we looked at every bill that comes up before Congress and gets passed and looked at it in terms of its ethical nature or its ethical consequences, I mean, what a different light that would cast on the passage of laws in our government. I mean, the thing is, it seems to be mostly missing from our institutions wherever you look.
Well, one of the problems, I think, in modern life is the rapidity with which social values change. And they change inevitably because the life conditions change. And so there's a lag, and one doesn't know how to evaluate certain things in terms of the contemporary conditions. But politics has to deal with the contemporary moment. And so there you are. You're up against a blank wall. It's almost like a creative world that we were talking about. It's the adventure. As I said somewhere sometime, we are in a free fall into future. The society itself is on the adventure. And so it's awfully hard to evaluate situations. Now, what has happened in this country in the past 30 or 40 years with immigrations of people from totally unforeseen places, with totally different life values from those of the people who, let's say, instituted this country. The people who instituted this country can no longer hold on with confidence to their system, which worked, let's say. Do you see? But it's got to open now to other things. I'm living in Hawaii. I think the majority of the people in Hawaii are not Christians. There are a lot of Japanese, a lot of Chinese, the Filipino frequently are Catholic also. But the saying, "In God we trust," it doesn't mean a damn thing to a Buddhist. I had a very amusing experience shortly after arriving in Honolulu. I was invited to give a talk in a church. Now, it was the church to which my wife's family was associated. And when I married Jean and went there, we went to that church. Well, I was brought up a Roman Catholic, and this was actually the first Protestant church service I'd ever experienced. It just seemed to me a kind of meeting, There was no Blessed Sacrament, there was no God in the house, and so forth. Well, I was invited to give a talk to the very people of that church, only a couple of years ago. And I had heard that they had been having some lectures on Buddhism. And they learned that the Buddhists don't believe in God. And so they wondered how they could have a spiritual life not believing in God. So I took that as my clue, and I started by saying that I had heard they just had that series of lectures. But when I first came to Hawaii, and my first experience of a Protestant service was that they didn't have God in the tabernacle. So the Protestants don't have God in the tabernacle, and the Buddhists don't have God in their vocabulary, so how could they have a religious, The God image is a metaphor for a spiritual experience. And you don't have to get it through that particular metaphor. This was something that I thought was an amusing teaser.
Well, in some sense, we create our own gods.
Yes, that's exactly what we do. No matter what name we give it, the God that we have is the one we're capable of having. That's something people don't realize, that because they're all saying the same name for God, they don't have the same relationship to that or concept of what it is. And the concept of God is only a foreground of the experience. Well, there you are. There was this wonderful mystic, Meister Eckhart, contemporary of Dante.
Who a number of Zen Roshis, by the way, have called very Buddhist.
Yes. In this sense, I found, as I was reading a sentence in one of his sermons, and the name of the sermon is On Riddance, Getting Rid of. And he said the ultimate riddance and the most difficult is the getting rid of your God to go to God. Wow. That's the big adventure, isn't it? That's the ultimate adventure. But that's just saying in big what you have to say every minute of your life, to get rid of the life that you have planned in order to have the life that's waiting to be yours, move into the transcendent. That's the whole sense of the adventure, I think.
Joseph, we're talking about creating our gods. What about our devils, our demons? The same process. In some sense, our gods become our demons, don't they?
My definition of a devil is a god who has not been recognized. That's to say, is a power in you to which you have not given expression, and you push it back. And then, like all repressed energy, it builds up and becomes completely dangerous to the position that you're trying to hold. And so it's a threat. One of the best examples of that, and the ambiguity of that, is the trickster figure in American Indian, Coyote and the rabbit, great hair and all. He's at once a fool and a creator. And he's a fool in that he is not acting in terms of the order of life that is in being. And he's a creator in that he's a breakthrough, And those are the unrecognized yet pressing energies that are threatening to break through. One of the obsessions, I think, in Christianity is the devil. When I turned from reading Oriental and tribal mythologies to any Orthodox Christian work, suddenly the devil is there. I think he's more important than God. He's the reason for all the wars against other people, He justifies the massacre of primitive tribes. They're all devil worshippers. And anyone who has an experience of the divine that's not that of this particular clergy is worshiping the devil. And that's the word that's actually used for their gods throughout.
I like that story that the Tibetans talk about of when Padmasambhava came to Tibet and he was faced with all of these demons and evil deities of the bone tradition. He basically transformed them into protectors of the Dharma.
That's it.
And that's what we're really talking about.
That's an old mythological trick. The savior hero overcomes a demon and then makes him the protector. There's a wonderful story of the Buddha 2 incarnations before his last, when he was Prince 5 Weapons. He had, as a young man, learned how to use 5 weapons, and he's riding home now, a triumphant young warrior prince. And out of a forest comes a great big demon, a great monster whose name is Sticky Hair. And the Buddha, the future Buddha, is threatened by this. And he throws at him his javelin, and the javelin sticks in his hair. Then he gets his bow and arrow, and he sends arrow after, and they all stick in his hair. Then he throws his discus, it sticks in his hair. He takes his sword, it sticks in his hair. He takes his club, it sticks in his hair. Then he hits him with his right fist, then his left, then kicks him with his right foot, then his left, and then butts him with his head. Do you recognize this? This is Brer Rabbit with the tar baby. It's the same story. And so he's stuck. The demon says, "I'll bet you're frightened now, boy." And he says, "No, I'm not. Because I have that within me, a knowledge that will blow both of us to smithereens. And you're afraid of that. I'm not." So the demon said, "Okay, lets him loose." So the Buddha had conquered Sticky Hair. And then what did he do? He made him the guardian of that wood. It's the recognition, the dealing with it, and then giving it its place. This place may be the same place it had, only you've recognized that place and its importance. Do you see what I mean?
And the relevance to that in everyday practical life is that so often we tend to repress our demons and shove them into the closet, push them under the rug, and not deal with them.
Then that's what they become. They become the monster.
And so then the creative adventure, what could be the creative adventure, becomes the journey through hell.
That's right.
Why do you think it is that we continue to repress our demons and not allow them to, not deal with them?
Well, because they ask for a larger dimension in our lives than we're willing or able to give. I mean, it's important to hold a form and not just to blow. But in doing that, one should know what the powers are that are being asked to hold back, because recognizing them is part of integrating them. And then the form that you're holding is held in relation to what it's not doing.
Say that again, just for emphasis.
That's always hard. You talk out of an inspiration, and then, so what was that?
Yeah, sure, right. Say the same thing differently. How's that?
Well, I think one has to control one's life. You can't let all of your impulse system take over. You wouldn't have a life. You'd go to pieces.
But in some sense, when you follow the adventure, you really have to let go of wanting to control it, don't you?
I know, but that's the problem. That's why I say heavy winds blow. There's that saying in the Chandogya Upanishad, or maybe it's one of the other Upanishads, the narrow blade of a razor is this. It's a narrow, difficult path. And the problem is, this is the real problem of the left-hand path of following your bliss instead of instructions. You're following the lead of your emotion and your vitality, but the head has to be there all the time. And you're on a narrow ridge. And the danger is falling off. That is to say, letting too much of the torrent of energy come through and blow it. There's nothing right or wrong when you're on the path, but there is imprudent and prudent action. Do you see what I mean? Because you're beyond good and evil as soon as you step out of the society. But, you can lose your life that way. That's why it's a dangerous path. It is.
It's also the dangers inherent in becoming what's known as a spiritual teacher. That narrow path is walked on.
One of the dangers of the spiritual teacher job is pride. You think you are a spiritual teacher. You're not. You're giving people clues so that they can develop their own spiritual life. But if you take pride, then you've fallen off the sword bridge.
This whole idea of following the life of spirit and having to surrender and give up, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that surrender is all about. It's really, in mythological terms, a surrender to the God within, isn't it?
Yes, but the God within may not have very much respect for the life that you've got to lead. And so you got to keep God from pushing too hard. Do you see what I mean? Let him come slowly. Because being God is not being on earth. God himself had to descend and get crucified to be on earth, do you see? And that business of not getting quite crucified is the task. It is a narrow path. If you're really following the adventure of the impulse system of your life. One of the big impulse moments that many, many people follow is falling in love and marrying a person. I mean, you're not following the rules of the society who select the person you should marry, and all that kind of thing. It's a real adventure. And it's one that you mustn't be afraid of when you begin to find out what a mysterious adventure it's turning out to be. I think the big divorce rate comes from failure to be able to continue the adventure. Because no matter whom you tie up your life to, you're going to find this is a mysterious person, and there's a lot there that I didn't know about, and even the person itself didn't know about, and the person is having the same problem in relation to you as subject.
And both are changing all the time.
All the time.
Having to be open to that change. So often we want to freeze the other person into a position, a place.
Well, naturally, people have a notion of what a marriage ought to be, or the marriage they want. You can't have it and have the adventure of a love marriage. I mean, one or the other.
It's true.
And wherever the love takes you, there you go.
And that's the adventure.
That is the adventure. It's and I see marriage in two stages. One is that the wonderful impulse stage of youth, and everything's coming up roses and the birds are singing and all that. Then there comes a time when those, let's say, vital energies aren't there. But at the same time, there is an awakening of spiritual relationship. And when that doesn't happen, you see people getting divorced. I've been shocked at a number of my friends who, they brought up the family, everything was wonderful, the kids are gone, they get divorced. The second marriage, in every marriage, is the mystical one. The first is the physical, then the mystical. And that's the big step of the adventure. The first, we're going to have kids, the kids are going to go to school and all that kind of thing. And that's just the time in marriage, you see, when people tend to go apart. All the things that bound them together, the physical things, the joy of bringing up the family and all that, gone. So what next?
In some sense, too, all of those things have become walls to prevent us from really asking the question, why am I here?
Yeah.
What is it all about?
You got a lot of reasons, and just to have 2 cars or to, win a lottery or something like that. But, for heaven's sakes, that's the adventure. And it gets to be more and more adventurous the longer you live, I tell you that much.
Going back to your study of Native American lore, and one of the myths that come out of the Native American tradition is the myth of the vision quest. And I'm wondering how you would relate the vision quest to Christian mythology. What would be the counterpart in Christian mythology?
Well, it is the counterpart of the mystical approach. What might be called the Pentecostal point of view, that one, through one's own inward experiences the divine mystery in the way of one's own culture, references, and possibilities. This is the wonderful thing, I think, about the American Indian tradition, that sense of a divine realization possible to everyone, and one's whole life then is based on the experience of that vision. Whether the young man was to become a great warrior or a shaman or a chieftain is revealed to him at that time. So one finds one's own way through one's own experience, a way in the world in which one's living.
Why is appreciating such a myth important and relevant to the times we live in today?
Well, what I feel about the American Indian material is that for Americans, it's very important to know something about it, because mythology is rooted in the land as well as in the psyche. And our mythology has been brought from the Near East. A very long, long time ago it was put together. And it does not relate to our land unless we can, through our own experience, make it relate. Do you see? And if you do not have that experience, then the Holy Land is somewhere else. But the great realization of mythology is the immanence of the divine here, now. You don't have to go anywhere else for it. This is the Holy Land, the holy place, the holy moment. And I think that's a basic Christian experience in the land where Christianity emerged, but then as an import somewhere else, all the images have been alien. Do you see what I mean? And to find the Christ power here is the goal of such a meditation.
In some sense, we have the Native American tradition being kind of the mythic image of the land, and then the land became settled by cultures and peoples from many other traditions and societies and social milieus, and bringing a lot of different myths to the pot, as it were. And how do you see that has happened in America? I know you've written and talked about the idea that myth has been lost to us. Do you think that had something to do with it, the fact that this melting pot of various traditions coming into America produced a kind of a hodgepodge, no-myth society?
Well, the founding myth of the United States was the Christian myth in one sectarian form or another. Every state in the Northeast was formed by a sect that departed from the one next door and set up its own affair. But these are all variants of the Christian tradition. And this was a tradition that saw the truth as uniquely present in Christianity, and there was an actual degradation and denial of the possibilities of anyone else having the tradition. So that the deities of the Indians and the divine experiences were regarded as diabolical manifestations. I mean, one gets this all the time. I think that was a terrible thing to have happened.
What about all this we hear about the deterioration or the disappearance of the nuclear family, the loss of family roots, and kind of, again, the melting into society of individuals with no ties to their ancestral heritage?
Well, there you see where we are. We're between two worlds, a world that is dissolving right around us. Everything is dissolving right around us. And the one that's to come hasn't shown its features yet. There's one aspect that I think is showing itself as potential but not realized, and that is that we are members of the community of the earth. I say it's one community. The economic intercommunications, the fact that I was yesterday in Hawaii, and my wife Jean is now in New York, having left yesterday from Hawaii, and I'm here. Or we could have gone the other direction and been in Tokyo or Benares. We're in one world. And I can remember the experience teaching when I began to have in my classes youngsters from India, from Japan, from the countries that when I was a boy were just out of sight. It is one family now. But no one has the nerve to say so. One sees people pulling back to their in-groups. We're the right ones. And it's splitting not only in terms of nations and races, but also in terms of economic classes. And no one has a sense of participating in a great organization and organism, which is that of humanity on this planet. But that's the challenge of today. And since mythologies all have to do with linking these eternal forms, which are those of the psyche and of the mysteries of the universe, to the contemporary life situation, the new myth has to move into a one-world system.